Me and my big mouth have got myself into trouble on a couple of occasions. I'm competitive. I'm not a massive fan of that phrase, it's the taking part that counts, I'm being really honest with you. Because I think, yeah, that's fun, but I really want to win. And you know when you mask it and you're like, oh yeah, it's the taking part, but really you want to win. And as a teenager, I was part of a football team in Northfield Park, if you know Northfield Park. It's one of those football levels where there isn't enough money and they don't really have the right things and the pitch is slanted and you're always shooting downhill one of the weeks and then uphill the other. And I was part of this team, and one Saturday morning, my brother had come with me, Matthew, who's a couple of years older, to come to support me to play in this game. And I was playing as a bit of an attacking player, as a bit of a forward, and the ball got hit through, and I kind of was running onto the ball and heading towards goal. And obviously in that moment, you're thinking about how am I going to score, how am I going to do this thing? And as I plant my left foot to move forward to do that, the defender comes straight through me, takes my ankle, and I hit the deck. And I'm in pain. Later would I find out that I'd broken it in two places, my left ankle. And it was excruciating, but without even thinking, me and my big mouth shouted the one thing that was more important, and that was, referee, red card, send him off, ref, get rid of him. I was not interested in the pain of my ankle, but without even questioning it, I was contending to the ref. And me and my brother harassed the referee, and we were like, send him off. The ref didn't give anything. As you can see, I'm still dealing with it to this day. So if you have any advice how to do with that, then please, it would be welcome. Last week, Leon opened this series, Me and My Big Mouth, on the proviso, like the premise of our words shape our worlds. Our words shape our worlds. So whether it's what we say or what we think, or the narrative by which we live by, it shapes and has an impact on our words. And today we're going to look at one area of our words, which is lying. So you see, research suggests, according to a study done by the University of Massachusetts, that 60% of people cannot go 10 minutes or longer without lying in a conversation. That's none of us. We are not in that 60%. You are not in that 60%, I'm sure. And then on average, and we're not average people, we're above average, that you tell a lie up to 4 times a day, totaling 1,460 lies a year. That's quite a lot of lying, because it's really easy to do that. It can be, I know, for me, it can be really easy to tell a lie. If you ever want to, there's a game that's really easy to win, I think, around this. So if you ever played the game Two Truths, One Lie, it's a bit of an icebreaker and some social settings. And what happens is you go around the room and everybody has 3 statements they have to say about themselves. And the aim of it is that other people have to guess which one are the true statements, 2 of them, and which one is the lie. But it's way too easy to win, because you can change any piece of information ever so slightly, and then you can make it a truth or a lie, and you can lead people up the garden path, and you can win the game. So if you now go home thinking that my pastor's taught me how to kind of lie and win in the game, then I'm really sorry. I hope you don't just take that from today. But lying takes on a few forms, and it does for me, and perhaps for you. Let me cover a few of these with you. So firstly is that we will tell a lie. That we tell a lie. This takes the form of exaggerating a story to impress friends. Cheating on a test. Lying about where you were. You know, when someone's like, oh, where were you last night? And then you make up something completely different. Maybe you make up something about somebody you don't like. Telling a lie, twisting something, or a partial truth, or you leave out details, or you change the story for your benefit. Those can be lies we tell, and I'm guilty of this in one particular area. My wonderful wife says that I'm a bit of a time optimist. Now, if you don't know what she means by that, what she means is I have kind of formed this habit, I don't even like to do, but I do it anyway, where in the mornings in particular, I like to do way more in that time than I actually have time for. And so what happens is I'll try and get up and maybe pray, have breakfast, read my Bible, go to the gym, get back, get ready, all the time before I've got to get to work. And it scarcely works out well. I'm getting better, I promise. Leon's not here, so it's okay. And so in a previous employing situation when I worked for a sixth form college, I tried to do all of that, and my start time was about 8:30 in the morning. Not that early, granted, but I tried to do too many things. And I was guilty so many of the times of I would rock up at about 8:33, and I would try and get through the corridors of the sixth form college to my office before my line manager might have collared me and then thought what was going on. And after a couple of times this happening, he said to me, oh, kind of, what's going on, where you been? And I just went, oh, it was the traffic. And I'd blame the traffic. And the thing was, I would cheer when there was traffic because then it felt like it was justified. But actually, it really, really wasn't. And I was twisting the truth and I was telling a lie. Secondly, is that you lie to yourself. We lie to ourselves. Perhaps in the sense of bad behavior, and we justify it. We begin to justify and rationalize the way we do things, and we kind of defend ourselves in that way. Maybe we lie to ourselves, though, and there's things we're telling ourselves that are not true about ourselves. Stories we tell ourselves, and we paint ourselves in a way that is actually worse than it actually is the case. So maybe we even double down on lies. We tell one, and then we start digging into another one, and we add another lie into that situation, and we get ourselves spiraled into telling lies. And we may be saying in some situations, it's never your fault, it's never my fault. We're always the victim, even if actually we have hurt people and we've upset people because we're lying to ourselves. And thirdly, is that we could live a lie. This, not all of us, maybe not any of you, but maybe some of you, that we're claiming to be one thing, but actually we're being something completely different. Perhaps outwardly, you've got it all together. You're a good person, you make good decisions, morally, you're great. But behind closed doors, you've got a ravaging secret addiction that is really sucking the life out of you, and you're just hoping that nobody finds out. Or perhaps it's that social media bliss and you're posting those really great photos with the right filter, the right angle, the right food, the right people, the right backdrop, and painting this picture for yourself and to others of your life. But when in reality, you're actually terribly lonely and feeling very hopeless about life and how you feel about yourselves. We paint a picture of how we want life to be, but in actual fact, it's something completely different. Or maybe it's our relationships. Maybe it's your relationship, and on the surface, everybody sees that it's going really, really well, and you say the right things when you're out on a double date or with friends, but actually behind closed doors, it's really cold and it's not quite working. It feels fragile. Perhaps we're living a lie. But why do we lie? What are the motivations? What are the things that lead us towards this? Here's just a few thoughts for you. And it's primarily that we think our lie will work better than the truth. And firstly, it's that lies will bring me security. We say it, we change the truth, or we lie to ourselves, or we're living in a lie because we think it's safer than facing the reality of our lives and of our situations and trying to become content with that, or even face up to some really difficult things in the midst of it. Secondly, perhaps it's that lying will get me more. You've heard the phrase dishonest gain, and this idea that perhaps even at work or in those settings as well, when your boss or your employer wants to give some recognition for a piece of work or something that's done, and you know actually it was somebody else who did the hard work, but you pipe up and you say, oh, no, it was me, I was involved in that, and it's about trying to get that advantage, that kind of favor with somebody, perhaps one of those reasons why we tell a lie. And lastly, where I've struggled is that lying will help you like me. That we say things, we change things, we paint the story in a certain way so that you'll not think I'm messed up, or you'll think I'm good and nice and a good person to be around, or that you wouldn't then kick me to the curb as your friend if you really knew what was going on. These can be some of the reasons why we do that. Now, to put all that together, I think there is one consequence I want to touch on that adds to this and that doesn't help, and then we're going to explore what God has to say about it and what I think Jesus wants to invite us in to consider and think about when it comes to lies and truth. And I think the consequence is that when we tell lies and when we live in this way, it ties us up. It does the opposite of freedom. It binds us to an illusion about a story or a way that something happened. Maybe it chains us to a false reality of what's actually going on in our lives, but it definitely doesn't release us into freedom and a good experience and a releasing in any way. It does the very opposite. It constrains us. It constrains us. And I think that God doesn't want you or me or you to live that way. I think he came, I think we sing songs, I think we're here today in church because we believe that Jesus is the hope of the world and he came to bring freedom. And so I want to explore a little bit about what that might look like. See, God doesn't want us to live that way. So firstly, we're going to have a look at some passages in the Bible, some ways in which that God and some of these New Testament writers, and if you're new to church, we'll explain some of that as well, what he has to say about lying in the first place. So Proverbs 12:22. Proverbs is a bunch of wisdom literature found in the Bible in the Old Testament portion. And the idea around this stuff, wisdom from a biblical perspective, was not just about having great knowledge or knowing a lot of stuff, but was actually you were wise if you then took the ability to take that and put it into practice. And so it says this, our author's giving us a bit of an insight into what God thinks about lying. He said, the Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. He delights in people who are trustworthy. It's a strong word, detest. It means something not very nice, an abhorrence, something that's bad. Now, don't get confused here. This doesn't mean that God doesn't love you, that God doesn't like you, that God isn't for you. But in the same way, if you're a parent, guardian, you're in any sort of relationship, you know that there can be a coexistence of loving someone, of being for them, but not being happy with something they do in their behavior or the way that they might behave. The Message translation that Eugene Peterson did of this proverb says that God can't stomach liars. He's not a big fan of it. It's not something that fits with that. And that's because God doesn't want us to be chained into illusion and a false reality, but he wants us to experience freedom. And then the Apostle Paul, who was an early Christian leader, was an early Christian follower, some of you will know, he writes in 2 letters to 2 groups of Christians in the first century about this, and is very clear on his imperative. He says, do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self. He refers to it being something that was a previous life. He's saying, if you're a follower of Jesus, this isn't how we want to be living. It's about we want to aspire to be living in freedom, not lying to ourselves, to others. And then in another letter to a group in Ephesus, he writes a similar thing. What this adds up to then is this: no more lies, no more pretense. Tell your neighbor the truth. Now, if it were that easy, why do you still do it? Why do we still get caught up in some of the lies? And rather than just having Bible verses that tell us to do that, is there more to it? Actually, is there a bit of a blueprint? I think Jesus actually gives us some wisdom. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you're not a churchy person, if you're not about faith and you're watching online or you're here in the room, I think there's something for you in this. It's a bit of a principle, maybe something you could put into practice and explore that would make your life better, that would help your life and find freedom in these ways. So we're going to jump into the Gospel of John, which is one of the accounts of Jesus' life. And prior to this, as we're reading, Jesus is in a place called the Temple Courts, where he's near the temple, the place of worship for the Jewish people. And there's 2 audiences that are around him in his interaction. The first is the Pharisees, who are religious leaders. And they've been around and they're kind of contesting this thing with Jesus. And there were some Jewish people there as well. And prior to what we're about to read, Jesus is trying to say to them and make the claim, I am the Son of God. And in short, he's saying, you're missing God in all of this. You're missing God in my being here with you. You're missing it. But they don't like that. They get their knickers in a twist and they're not happy. And so they plot a way to kill Jesus. That's what they're doing. They're getting really frustrated. It's not going well. So then he turns, and here's where we're going to jump in. He turns to the Jews who had believed in him. And Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. If you hold here, he's saying, if you stick with, if you put into practice. Again, he's speaking more than just if you know my teaching, or if you're aware of it, or if you read it. He's saying, if you do something about it, you'll be my disciples. Disciples, the better kind of modern term for us is an apprentice, somebody who's a learner, somebody who's putting it into practice. So Jesus is saying, if you hold to my teachings, you'll be my learners. Then, it's our key word here, then if you do that, you will know the truth. You see, faith, yes, in many ways, is that step where we kind of step into unknown, we don't know what's going on, but it's not as if faith is somehow detached from a sense of knowledge. actually, as followers of Jesus, I want to encourage you, remind you, we can know stuff about God. We can know the reality of God, and it can be empirical. It can be the research. When we do the Alpha course with many people, there's a brilliant session that speaks about the factual evidence of Jesus rising from the dead. Knowledge can sit together with faith. And so Jesus is saying that that's the thing that will cause you to be free. And freedom here is so imperative for Jesus. It's just of the utmost importance in this way that he wants us to live in freedom. And so 2 reflections out of this. What do I think Jesus is saying? Well, I think firstly is that telling the truth brings freedom. I know you probably already knew that, but sometimes the obvious things are really helpful, right? Telling the truth brings freedom. As we start to tell the truth about ourselves, maybe our own situations, that can be freeing. It can take off the restraint of illusion. Maybe we just tell the truth to others, and we find that it brings a new level of trust and relational harmony as well. But here's the thing, is that when we tell the truth and it brings a sense of freedom, it isn't always pain-free. It can be difficult to actually tell the truth. And like on the other end, when we spoke about telling lies can be something to bring us safety, but actually then telling the truth can feel unsafe, but it will bring freedom. And then secondly, which I think is the more important one, is that living the truth will set you free. Telling the truth can bring freedom to a situation, to a circumstance, to an experience with somebody. But living the truth will set you free. And don't miss that how Jesus said that is not that we would just rock up to church and we'd say, yeah, I believe in God, and we'd sing some nice songs. But no, he said that if you hold to my teachings, then you'll be my disciples and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. There is a blueprint for how we be with Jesus, be like him, do the things he did. That is the thing that results in freedom. And so actually, the antithesis of these lies is to put into practice what God says and to become awake and aware of God and his reality of his love for us and humanity and how we're to relate to one another. It is true for all of us. And so what might you do with that? How could, when tomorrow you wake up and start in your week and think, well, what can I actually do? Well, I want to take what Jesus says there and just give you 3 simple things. And just find out what Jesus teaches, firstly. Maybe you don't do that. Maybe you're not doing that. That's okay. But perhaps you could find out what he teaches. How can you put it into practice if you don't know, right? So perhaps you could start in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus has this cool little sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. And it's full of things about how to act like Jesus or consider and think about life. And maybe you could find out and start there. Secondly, though, would be to pick one and to put it into practice. John Ortberg, a very wise and thoughtful Christian author, puts it this way: to put his words into practice and find them to be true. To put his words into practice and find them to be true. And perhaps in this setting with us talking about lies and truth, actually we could say to put his words into practice and find them to be reality. Maybe as we actually put some of the things that Jesus says into practice about how we were to serve other people, or even just Jesus' framework for prayer, that God is a heavenly Father who loves us, some of that can reframe our minds towards truth and reality. And then lastly is to stick with it, to keep going, to do that stuff. I know that for a long time in my life, I was going to church and I was around wonderful Christians and I was serving and doing that stuff, but wasn't putting his words into practice in my own life. And so I still felt a sense of restraint. But Jesus' invitation is to follow him, is to put his words into practice, to move away from telling lies or living a lie and to enter into reality, and it brings freedom. And so what might your relationships look like if you were to tell the truth and live the truth in them? Maybe it would bring a sense of freedom and hope in a new way. What would family life look like if you were to be open and honest with one another, not lying to feel safe, but to get it out in the open and to become trusting in a new and fresh way? And so in part of closing and in a way we can respond today, if you would like, and in the sites and online as well, we're going to take one of these things that Jesus encourages us to do and try it here together. And it's that we would confess to God for forgiveness and to people for healing. Now, I know that word confess might feel a bit religiously loaded and a bit have a load of connotations with it. Can I propose to you that maybe a better way to think about it is just to bring into the light, it's to uncover, it's to be honest about something. It's to be honest about how you're really feeling in your circumstances, in your life with God. And that's the one we're going to do today. We're going to do the first half of this today. You see, because there's some imperatives that our Bible teachers give us, and one of them is the Apostle John, who we just spoke about, and he says this: if we confess our sins, if we're open about the ways that we get things wrong, or maybe the lies that we're living about ourselves, that he is faithful, God is faithful and just, and will forgive us and purify us from all unrighteousness. That's a really kind of fancy way of saying it. And he'll make us clean from this wrong and ill-fitting relationship with God. That he'll bring about a sense of wholeness in that way. And then there is power in, and if you're new to this, and maybe you could experience this in one sense where we have people who would love to pray with you, and we have it every week for people who want to be prayed for, and there's people online willing to pray with you guys who are tuning in from there. That if we confess, then in James, and James is one of the early Christian leaders, he said, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other that you may be healed. He's not necessarily just speaking here about physical healing, but he's speaking about the fact that we carry shame and guilt about when we get things wrong. And we might be living in that lie of shame and guilt and putting ourselves down. But actually, when we bring it to somebody else and we ask them, would you pray with me? That it can bring about a sense of wholeness, and it can bring about a sense of completeness that only God can do. And so we're going to respond, if you would like, and if you're able, in a moment, to talk to God and be honest with him in that way, and I'll explain that. And then following that, we're going to take communion. And communion is a way in which we remember Jesus, that we take emblems of his body and his blood, and we recognize the debt and the life that he gave for ours. And we're going to do that. There's 6 stations around the room. Maybe the nearest is behind you if you want to join in, or to the sides or down the front. And we're going to do that in a second. But first, if you're willing and able and you'd like to, would you close your eyes and join me in a moment of prayer? And rather than me talking, and please join us online at our locations, rather than me talking at you, just like to present you with an opportunity to be honest with God. To bring it into the open and maybe say something like, God, I'm really struggling. Or, God, I've been living this lie around this situation. Or, God, I'm lying to myself about one of these things. And it takes some bravery, and that's okay. So just going to give you a couple of minutes of stillness to do that while the piano is playing, and then we're going to come back and we're going to take a moment of communion together. And if you didn't feel anything, or if you didn't do that, that's okay. God still loves you too, and that's part of just the journey, being open and honest with God. But maybe that was a moment for you to be honest with God, and perhaps it stirred some emotion, and if you want somebody to talk to or to pray with you afterwards, please do as you head into the atrium, take a left or let us know online, and we'd love to do that and support you in that way as well. And so I'm going to pray, and then we're going to take communion together, and then the band are going to come and sing, and they'll invite us to sing with them as well. So the stations are around if you'd like to do that. And we're just going to continue in this moment of reflection and bringing some things honestly to God, and then as part of communion, just saying thank you to God. Saying thank you for what Jesus did and that he is for us and loves us. So let me pray. God, thank you that you are compassionate and kind. And thank you that when we are honest with you, you're not wagging your finger and angry, or you're sighing because you're like, how could you do that? But God, you meet us with compassion, and you want to bring comfort to us, and you want to direct us forward in how we can be released into freedom and freedom with you. We thank you, Lord. Amen.